Hello everyone, my name is Yara and today I'm going to be doing a book haul slash mostly summer TBR. I don't know if I've done a book haul on this channel before. I don't really buy a lot of books all at once, and I've also gotten to the habit of reading from the library first and then buying books after I've kind of screened them to make sure I actually want to buy them. But it was recently Independent Bookstore Day on April 26th, and I was in the city and decided to stop by some bookstores and pick up some of their books. So for the book haul portion of this, I have 2 books from independent bookstores, and then I have 2 just from Barnes & Noble when I stopped by. And then I'm going to talk about just other books that I want to read this summer. I know it's only May, but, like to plan ahead. But it's also just a good place to talk about just what I've been in the mood for, what's kind of been calling my name in the reading world recently. So the first book I have is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. I picked this up at Shakespeare & Co. in New York City. Side note, if you are in the New York City area, they actually closed 2 of the locations of Shakespeare & Co. I know they're only going to have 1 consolidated location, which is kind of sad. But anyway, this is an adult fantasy standalone that is a retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale. I have read 2 Goose Girl retellings before. I read The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, which I loved. And I also read Thorn by Intisar Khanani, which I also loved and is very underrated. I feel like prior to reading The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, I really wasn't that familiar with the fairy tale. I feel like it's not as common in the public knowledge, or maybe I'm just uncultured, but I have now gone 2 for 2 for Goose Girl retellings, so hopefully this one is also good. This is basically about a girl named Cordelia who is under the watch of her very controlling sorceress mother. After something suspicious happens in their town, Cordelia's mother forces them to flee, and they move to a remote manor owned by a wealthy man named the Squire, whom the sorceress decides to kind of beguile into becoming her husband. But the Squire does have a sister named Hester who kind of notices that there is something weird going on with the sorceress, and she realizes she might have to save both her brother from potential enchantment as well as save Cordelia from the control of her mother. I have heard many great things about T. Kingfisher as an author, so I really wanted to check her out. I also love fairy tale retellings, and I also love that this is going to try to adhere to that kind of gothic, dark portrayal of those fairy tales. I don't know exactly when I'm going to read this because I feel like fairy tale retellings and kind of gothic stories are more of a fall vibe, but since I just got this, I'm kind of just excited to check it out, so maybe it'll be this summer. The next book I bought was Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, and I got this from McNally Jackson Books in Soho. Obviously, we all know the name C.S. Lewis from the Chronicles of Narnia series, and I read Chronicles of Narnia, at least I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe way back in 5th grade, so do not remember it apart from what I remember from the movie. Have really no recollection of C.S. Lewis as an author besides just what I know from him and his kind of place in the literary canon. But I actually had never even heard of this book that he wrote, and I only found it because I was specifically looking for more myth retellings. I didn't mean to buy 2 retellings, but that's just kind of, I guess, my taste. And this is actually a Cupid and Psyche retelling, which is a tale from Greek mythology. Psyche is a mortal girl who is astonishingly beautiful to the point where people start worshipping her in place of worshipping Aphrodite. Aphrodite obviously gets mad and sends her son Cupid to punish Psyche. After many years, and after a lot of people are almost kind of intimidated by her beauty, Psyche is unable to find a husband, and so the town kind of sends her as a sacrifice to the gods, and she is cursed to marry a monstrous serpent-like creature, who she is not allowed to see as well. Only this creature actually ends up being Cupid. There's a little more to the story than that, but that's the basic gist. But this story is actually from the perspective of Psyche's sister, her ugly sister, who is bitter that Psyche was chosen by the god of love himself. However, in addition to this being kind of just her perspective and her reaction to the situation, it's also a kind of reflective reckoning about the sister's part in what ultimately happens to Psyche. It's a story that is also trying to examine the cruelty of the gods and their relations to mortals. There's a quote in the synopsis that kind of illustrates that. It says, "I saw well why the gods do not speak to us openly, nor let us answer. Why should they hear the babble that we think we mean? How can they meet us face to face till we have faces?" I was mainly drawn to this story because I actually read the story of Cupid and Psyche in a class in college, and it was one of my favorite stories that I actually read in that class, and so I'm interested to see what C.S. Lewis kind of does with that. The next book I bought was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black, illustrated by Ravina Kai. This is a companion novella to the Cruel Prince series, written in the perspective of Prince Cardan. So I read the Cruel Prince trilogy earlier this year, as well as the sequel, duology, The Stolen Heir, after many years of thinking that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I actually ended up really liking it. I had some flaws. I had some notes about it, but overall I had a really fun time with the series, and I just like immediately got invested in the world and Holly Black's writing. One thing that did disappoint me a little bit about the series was that I wasn't totally satisfied with Jude and Cardan's relationship, which was so surprising because I feel like that is the one thing that everyone always boasts about this series, is how obsessed they are with them. And I liked them, don't get me wrong, but I just felt like they only got me like 70% of the way there. And it was because like I feel like we didn't really get a lot of Cardan's true feelings, since they were always so clouded by the thought that we were in Jude's head. Hence why I was interested in picking this book up, because it is from Cardan's POV, and I think it's going to go through some scenes that were in The Cruel Prince and kind of explore what he was thinking at that time. And I also just really liked the art in this book, and I liked the fact that it was illustrated, and so I wanted like a physical copy of it. Okay, so the last book in the book haul portion of this video is The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. This is a non-fiction book that is mostly academic and historical, with bits of memoir and personal stories infused in there about the history of Palestine, beginning in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration and ending in 2017, and seeing kind of what currently is going on. This is a book that I've been meaning to read for a few years now. As someone who is Middle Eastern, I've obviously known and been aware of what has been going on in Palestine, and obviously most recently Gaza. But I've been wanting something that's a little bit more comprehensive about more historical facts that I wasn't aware of and that I could kind of look to kind of see also a timeline of how it happened. This is the only book on this list that I actually have already started. I've been listening to the audiobook on Hoopla for the past couple of weeks. Because it's nonfiction, I have been trying to take more of my time with it. It's also divided into 6 sections based on 6 critical turning points that Rashid Khalidi feels are important in the history of Palestine, that kind of give you a framework of timelines and important figures involved. And so I want to make sure at the times that I read it, I am like fully able to ingest the information. But while I was in the bookstore, I noticed that when I flipped through the book that there are actually pictures and different like visual elements in the book in addition to the writing. And so I wanted to pick up a physical copy to be able to kind of go back and see all those things that I might have missed in the audiobook. And I just think that this is a book that I'm going to want to refer back to in the future, as well as maybe give to other people to read. And so I wanted a physical copy of it. So that was it for the book haul portion. Now I'm just going to go on to some books that I just am in the mood for and kind of want to read in the next few months. We are going all over the place in terms of genre, as you might imagine from those beginning books. But we can start with the ones that more explicitly scream summer to me. And when I think of summer, obviously I think of romance. And one romance book that I really want to read is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is a book that I have seen recommended for so many years, and I think this summer is going to be the one where I read it. This is a story that is following 2 writers who 20 years prior to the start of the novel had a week-long whirlwind romance. Now, all those years later, they unexpectedly cross paths at a literary event, which triggers a lot of memories and also kind of awakens a lot of buried feelings. Not really buried feelings though, because we end up finding out that they have actually been kind of writing to each other with their books throughout all these years. That premise, particularly of like 2 people who have been kind of writing past each other for so many years, really intrigues me. I feel like it's going to be really beautiful. I do love a good book about people writing books. I think the author also just recently published a YA novel following the daughter of the main character in this book, so if I enjoy this one, I might check that one out as well. But in general, I'm just really excited, and I hope that this lands for me as much as it does for everybody else. Keeping on the romance train, I also want to read some YA romance, and so I want to read a book called You Started It by Jackie Khalilieh. This is following a 17-year-old girl named Jamie who is starting her senior year off with a bunch of lists of exciting things that she wants to do, particularly with her boyfriend, Ben. All her plans kind of come crashing down though when Ben unexpectedly decides to break up with her. Even worse, he moves on to another girl almost immediately. Jamie obviously is upset, but she's determined to win him back, and she does so by fake dating a boy named Axel. Now, she and Axel have nothing alike, really. She's very anxious, he's very carefree, she's very messy, he's very meticulous. They really don't share much besides the fact that they both have an Arab heritage. But the more they spend time with one another, the more Demi realizes that what she actually wants from senior year might not be in one of her lists. So this book was actually a last-minute addition to this list. Last year, I read this author's debut, Something More, and while I really liked the ideas and the setup and what the author was trying to do with the story, I was ultimately disappointed with the execution. And so I was a little hesitant. I wasn't sure if I was going to try this next book that she came out with, but she ended up writing something on Goodreads that really had me curious about this book. I'll link the full note below, but basically she talks about what inspired her to write this book, and particularly to write a YA coming-of-age novel with an Arab male love interest for her main character. She talks about how there isn't really that much positive representation for Arab men in media. At least in the media that we have grown up on, Arab men are always stereotyped to be cold or violent, or obviously we have the terrorist stereotype. And in particular, after witnessing all of the videos and pictures of men in Gaza, of people who have been showing strength and love and vulnerability, she wanted to make sure that in her novels, she was able to kind of portray that representation as well, to kind of deconstruct these stereotypes, but also just to provide a new perspective for younger readers. And when I read this, it really stood out to me and also really resonated with me, because even as someone who specifically seeks out works by Arab authors, I still don't see that many works that have Arab men as love interests, at least in YA. There really isn't that much besides maybe like As Long as Lemon Trees Grow. And so overall, I was just really interested in seeing what the author does with this story and what she's trying to achieve, and hopefully I'll find a new YA rom-com that I really love. Okay, so now doing a 180 in terms of genre, the next book I want to read is actually the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. You probably already know R.F. Kuang from Babel or Yellowface, which are hugely popular on here. I have read both of those works. I loved Babel, thought Yellowcase was good, but not the best. But still good in the sense that I really enjoy R.F. Kuang's ideas, and I'm always going to be willing to read what she writes. And this summer, she's going to be coming out with her next novel, Calabasas, which I guess should also be on this list because I do want to read that when this comes out. But anyway, I want to read The Poppy War as well, just to complete like all the works that she has published. So that's kind of the general reason why I want to read the Poppy War trilogy, but the more specific and accurate reason as to why I want to read it right now is because I finished Attack on Titan a few weeks ago, and I loved it. I have not watched anime since I was like in middle school, so I was a little bit hesitant, but I was like immediately engrossed by Attack on Titan, and it left me in such a slump. Like after I finished it, I was like, I just want this, but different, in another form. And so I looked up books to read if you like Attack on Titan, and overwhelmingly people have suggested the Poppy War trilogy, and that's what ultimately influenced me. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. I don't even know that much about the plot of the Poppy War, other than the fact that it is a historical fantasy war novel that is inspired by the Opium Wars in China. I kind of don't want to know more than that. I just kind of want to experience it, and so I'm very excited, and I hope it gives me the same feeling as Attack on Titan. That feeling being utterly and emotionally destroyed by the end. So the last two things on this summer TBR are kind of more general authors that I want to read this summer. I don't know which books I'm going to read in particular, but whatever suits my fancy in the moment. The first one is Sally Rooney, and in particular, I want to read Normal People as well as Intermezzo. Last summer, I kind of did a project where I read all of Emily Henry's romance books and then did a comprehensive review of all of them in a video. And I kind of wanted to do something similar with Sally Rooney since she is an author that I've heard so much about, and I'm very curious. She's also very divisive. I know not everyone likes her works, but at least those two books I do want to check out this summer. The next author is Abby Jimenez, going along with the more romance energy. Again, might do another video where I read all of her books and provide a kind of comprehensive review, depending on how much time I have and how in the mood I am for those books. But I have heard a lot of good things about her romance books, not particularly of the one that just came out. I think it's called Say You'll Remember Me. That one got a lot of heat on Book Talk, so I might not start with that one, but I definitely heard people like her other books, so I think I'll definitely start checking that out. Alright, so that completes most of the books that I want to read this summer. Availability from the library might also dictate what I end up reading and in what order. Please let me know any of your thoughts on these books if you read them, and also just what you're planning on reading in the end of spring as well as going into summer. I've definitely been out of the loop when it comes to new releases, especially when it comes to romance. Like, I don't know what the big names are besides like the ones that kind of permeate cross genres. So in general, I'd be happy to hear any recommendations if you have them. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.